Hello, everybody, and welcome to News Without Prejudice, our very first news segment here from Gossip Without Prejudice. I'm excited to go through some stories today. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing fantastic. There's a lot of stuff going on
That's for sure.
in the world right now, and so we have done a little bit of news content before, but we figured we should split it off since so much is happening. And then what we'll do is we'll be releasing this smaller segment independently throughout the week so that you'll still get the normal show rotation, but this will bring a little bit more clarity and consistency to the segment.
Yeah, and give us more space to talk.
Yes.
Because we're good at that.
Amen.
So, our first story today, are you ready to
Okay.
jump into it?
Yeah.
On March 3rd, the governor of Virginia granted clemency to a man who was convicted of involuntary manslaughter.
Okay.
So, in short, this was another case of a white police officer using unnecessary force on a black man.
Okay. Tell me the
And
circumstances.
So, the circumstances. The man was named Timothy McCree Johnson. This was in February 2023.
Okay.
So, this one's a little older by now. But on March 3rd, 2025, the governor of Virginia granted clemency to a man who was convicted of involuntary manslaughter.
Okay.
In short, this was another case of a white police officer using far unnecessary force on a black man.
So that was when he killed the gentleman, or is this when he was granted clemency?
February 2023 was when he killed the person. And then he was
Gotcha.
granted clemency literally just 4 days ago at time of recording.
Oh, goodness. And which governor?
This is the governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin.
Okay, Glenn.
I think I'm saying that right. Youngkin in one word.
What was the administration's justification for the clemency?
Quote directly from Governor Youngkin here. I am convinced that the court's sentence of incarceration is unjust and violates the cornerstone of our justice system, that similarly situated individuals receive proportionate sentences. So that's what the governor thinks. But I also want to bring up, before we talk about anything else, the prosecuting attorney. His name is Steve Descano. He is I believe he's the community attorney or something like that, Commonwealth attorney.
Okay.
Steve Descano says Glenn Youngkin has spent the last 4 years honing his Trump impersonation, and now he's following in his footsteps by commuting sentences just to score political points. This is an insult to all Virginians who value an untainted justice system. So, you ready to get into this story here?
Absolutely.
For the first time in 15 years, a convicted criminal will be executed via firing squad today.
Really?
Yes, this is Friday, March 7th. The big issue here is that this man, he originally chose death by firing squad because he assumed that lethal injection or the electric chair would be more painful.
Well, honestly, okay, this is which county or state is this?
This is in South Carolina.
That is interesting because it's actually, in my opinion, true that a lot of states have really struggled to find methods of execution that are humane, lethal injection in particular. They can't find any drug companies to supply the drugs reliably, like states generally, and also they can't find any physicians to oversee it. So it's usually just something like a physician's assistant or a coroner they can find. It really varies across state to state, but there's been a lot of horrific stories of tremendously botched executions.
Yeah, that's really rough.
I would take the firing squad too.
You think so?
If it was at least 6 guys. If it was just one guy.
It's 3 guys.
Oh, it's 3 guys?
It's 3 guys, and they're anonymous. You don't get to see them or their faces or anything. They're behind a curtain. And what they do, they take the prisoner in, they put them in a chair, and then they put a bag over their head, and then they put a target on their heart.
Well, at least they give him the target.
At least they give him the bag.
At least they give him the bag. Well, and the classical firing squad, you had like 3 to 6 guys, and they had one cartridge that had a blank, and the men killing him did not know who had the blank, and that was to preserve some plausible deniability.
Sure.
Because you can't tell who killed him.
Right.
And that's the thing about justice is that like trying to execute somebody who just doesn't. Like it's inhumane and wrong, and I think a lot of fundamental parts of our human nature sort of know that, and a lot of people who even execute the most heinous people imaginable always tell stories about how awful the experience was.
I imagine that's got to be a really rough position for everyone to be in. And this man, so his name is Brad Sigmund, he has been trying to appeal his decision to choose the firing squad. He's been trying to switch to lethal injection or electric chair.
Really? So
Yeah.
he picked it and the courts won't let him back out?
That's right. The courts won't let him back out.
Huh.
And this comes down to the governor of South Carolina. Supposedly today is the last chance. This execution is supposed to happen at 3 p.m. our time zone. So it'll happen after we're done recording for the day. But there's still a chance that the governor, Henry McMaster, might grant Brad Sigmund clemency or pardon him or something, or commute his sentence to life in prison instead of death.
There's been an execution moratorium in Washington State for as far as back as I can remember. Democrats have been in power here for like 36 years. For better or worse, opinion part of the piece is I don't believe the state should have the power to kill anyone.
That's a big question.
I think the police should have, lethal force in defense of others, but I think that's as far as that power should go. I don't think the court should be able to execute anyone. Reasonable people disagree, especially when it comes to particularly heinous crimes. But that's tough to see. I hope he's granted clemency. We will find out.
Yeah, I hope so too. When you put it that way, using lethal force in the defense of others, yes, cool. But when there's no one in danger, this man's going to be in prison for the rest of his life either way. Why does he deserve to die? I don't know. That's a very, very fraught subject. But let us know if you guys want to hear more about the death penalty and its legalities and all that entails.
Hey guys, I have a personal favor to ask. It would mean the world to me if you could share the podcast, leave a review, or tell a friend about our work. We are on a mission to make the legal industry more accessible for everyone. If you want to support the podcast, go to gossipwithoutprejudice.com. A monthly pledge as low as $5 keeps our work free for everyone forever.
California's February bar exam has been a complete mess. Have you heard anything about this?
You mentioned this to me, but I did not hear anything else about it because I wanted to preserve the surprise. I presume the State Bar of California increasing dues by $100 a year last year really did not help with their administration. Tell me what happened.
Well, all of what they're doing here is a hope to save money.
Okay.
So the whole project here, beginning in July 2024, California State Bar announced that they were going to create a hybrid exam so as to save money, so they could have online test takers in different testing centers and just make it a lot easier for everybody. So at the end of February, test takers came in and took this new bar exam. However, it was riddled with technical difficulties, like seriously bad. I was reading stories. There was one woman who tried to start the exam 30 separate times, and every single time she tried to start it, it just crashed, and so she couldn't complete the exam.
She just missed the testing date.
Yes.
Oh my God.
And for some of our non-lawyer folks here, people spend thousands of dollars preparing for the bar. This is an extremely expensive test.
To speak nothing of the time investment it takes to
Yes,
study.
that's for sure.
Were the scores compromised too, or was it just the test taking?
Yup, scores were compromised.
Oh God.
So the company that handled the test taking, they're called Measure Learning.
Okay.
They reported that only 2% of the submitted exams were missing content that would suggest technical issues.
Okay.
But that doesn't account for all the people who couldn't submit their exams.
Okay.
But and there's got to be other issues with that statistic. The dean of Purdue Global Law School, he communicated with deans across the state of California, and he reported that 60 to 90% of graduates experienced technical issues with this test.
This really
almost everybody had issues with this.
This parallels the October 2024 LSAT. So
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I took the LSAT in September of 2024. And the month after I took the exam, several questions were eliminated after the fact, which doesn't sound that bad until you realize that the LSAT is scored on a curve. So when the question is eliminated, if you got it right, then that no longer counts in your favor, which is bad. And if you got it wrong, then eliminating it is also bad because all that time you invested in trying to get the question right that could have been spent on other questions is wasted, and time constraint is one of the biggest handles on the LSAT. Wow. And this is one of the beefs I have with the standardized testing in the legal industry is that when they're poorly administered, what little value I would argue little value they have to the legal industry is completely eliminated, and it also
Yeah.
undermines trust in the system.
Absolutely.
A system that most law students have no option but to navigate anyways.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
I read one particular story of there was a young man who was in, I can't remember which country in Africa. I think the article didn't specify. And he had traveled, he'd been working with a tutoring company, and he traveled to California to take this test. And lo and behold, all these technical issues, and he can't even complete it in the end. So the test has been rescheduled for a couple of weeks into March, but the bar is also offering full refunds to anyone who decided to just withdraw and not go through with the test this year.
Damn.
So hopefully the next test will go much better. But the last thing that I have here is that the California State Bar also offered a retake for anyone who directly experienced technical issues.
The word directly?
Exactly. Only around 86 test takers qualified for this retake, and there were 5,600 test takers.
And see, that's same energy as like the income the income-based repayment or a loan forgiveness program that the federal government tried to put in place after COVID. And it was riddled with so many technical loopholes and technical difficulties that out of the millions of student borrowers in the public sector that might have been eligible for it, as Congress intended, only about 90 in the whole country
Wow.
actually got their loans forgiven.
That's almost a useless portion of
Yes,
people.
exactly, right? I want to take a second to talk about the potential abolishment of the Department of Education.
Yes, please. I saw a little bit about that, but I didn't look at any details, so I'm
those of you
excited
that
to hear.
do not know, the Trump administration is purportedly, according to the Washington Post and a few other sources at this point, purportedly looking to abolish entirely the Department of Education. Now, if you do not know, the Department of Education at the federal level does not actually mandate any curriculum anywhere in the states at any level of education. For the people saying that, hey, we're concerned the federal government is dictating what we're teaching our children, the Department of Education does not do that. What they mostly do...
That hurts my brain a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I was one of those people. I assumed the Department of Education stipulated
their
curriculum.
biggest charge is defending things like Title IX. Basically, they make sure that schools for low-income and disabled children, people with disabilities or IEPs, individual education plans, those are federal. Those are federally mandated. They have an enforcement mandate. Wait,
okay,
hold
yes.
on.
Holding
And
on.
what they do is they administer all the student loans, Pell Grants, etc. across the country. Now, here's opinion, have significant beef with the way the Department of Education is set up when it comes to student loan borrowing, because anytime you give unlimited money to anyone, the cost of whatever unlimited thing you're letting them buy will inevitably skyrocket.
Oh, yeah, that's
right?
for sure.
And so back in the 50s, Lyndon B. Johnson and a couple of other presidents were like, hey, we want to make sure that education is never a barrier for income is never a barrier to education.
As it should be.
Which is fantastic. That's a fantastic thing. But then Congress took away people's ability to get out of student loan debt in bankruptcy. So student loan debt
Wait, really?
is one of the only debts in the actually, I think it's like the only consumer debt that cannot be discharged in any chapter of bankruptcy.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's
once
geez.
you have student loan debt, it cannot be discharged.
Wow.
So the reason this is important is because banks know that. They know that you cannot, because the federal government has made it so that you cannot get out from under it, and because they've made it so that they will give some sort of funding to anyone to get any sort of education regardless of the economic viability. That explains, taken together, why the cost of education has gone up and up and up and up, and why University of Utah has like an infinity pool and a lazy river, which is a true story, on their main campus.
Wow.
Schools have turned away from education as the primary product and turned towards a lifestyle that people otherwise would not be paying for if they didn't have access to all this federal money.
I see.
All that being said,
Wow.
I think anyone should be able to go and get an education.
Yep.
I just think there are some problems with the affordability crisis is man-made, and I think I think it's driven
Because
by
of
the
the
federal
system.
government. Yeah, exactly. So, with all that being said, am I in favor of it just being dissolved overnight? Personally, no.
No, that's not.
Yeah, that's not the way to fix the system. Isn't by throwing the whole thing out all at once.
Yes.
Lindsay, thoughts?
It's just such a. I think about all the people who the student loans is the biggest, heaviest weight in their lives, and it creates so much stress. And now the fact that the one thing that I read about this case was people have complaints about their student loans and they need to talk to the department, and so many of those people have been slashed already that the complaints are already lining up, and people could be defaulting on their student loans because they haven't, communicated with the department in the way they need to because there's a waiting line. It's completely the opposite in my head of creating a better system.
Well, that's actually what's funny is that the cuts that Doge is making doesn't necessarily mean there will be fewer people working for the federal government. It's just they will not be federal workers, right? So the federal government is still free, theoretically, and a lot is up in the air right now. The federal government is still free to hire contractors. And contractors often work for more, right? It's privatization. In fact, the Department of Education doesn't actually directly administer the student loans. They have delegated that to several large companies.
I see. I didn't know that was contracted out.
And your student loan profile can get shuffled between any of like the three big players. I forget the names of the companies.
That sounds bad.
At any time. And actually, these companies the complaints that you're talking about, they're notorious for being poorly handled. It's why
already.
well, public-private partnerships have tremendous power when done properly. I don't think they've been done properly here.
That's the news, folks.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us on our first News Without Prejudice.
Yes. Thank you. We'll be back later this week. Stay safe, like and follow for the show. We'll be back with more, I think, office hours soon. We're still figuring out the publication schedule, so we're not putting any days to it yet. But you'll be hearing from us a little bit more than once a week.
Yes.
Thanks
and let
so
us know
much.
what you think.
Yes.
All
right.
Thanks.
Bye.